After a career in public education that included time as a classroom teacher, district administrator, and superintendent, Fran Rabinowitz was appointed to the executive director of the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. Recently, CAPSS joined CCM and a coalition of educator and school-focused organizations to urge the state to fund critical HVAC repairs in public schools across the state. Given her unique vantage point as someone who has served in a multitude of roles, we welcome her today to Municipal Voice to talk public school issues in Connecticut. We'd like to thank our premier sponsor, Digital Back Office Palo Alto Networks. Check them out at digitalbackoffice.com or paloaltonetworks.com. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or member municipal leaders. Fran, thanks for joining us today.
I'm very happy to be here, Matt.
Excellent. So to start off, I wanted to get a little background about yourself for the listeners at home. I know you started out as a teacher in Bridgeport, and then what kind of other, positions have you kind of gone through in the school system?
Well, I was a teacher in Bridgeport and spent the greater part of my career in Bridgeport. I was a teacher and an administrator. I was in charge of research and evaluation for many years, and then teaching and learning. I went to the state from there, and I was at the state for 7 years as associate commissioner, and then spent 7 years as a superintendent in Hamden, and went back to Bridgeport for 3 years as an interim.
We all went to school when we were kids, and we kind of we saw what teachers did firsthand and kind of understand that. But the administration is always a little bit more separate for some of us, at least. Could you just kind of give us an idea of what a superintendent does in a Connecticut school?
Oh, definitely. A superintendent is really what I would liken to the CEO of a organization. And I think, of course, I'm prejudiced because I was a superintendent, but I do believe that the superintendent plays a very pivotal role in either moving the district forward or keeping it stagnant or moving it backwards. And I think much of that is dependent upon, yes, the skills and knowledge that the person brings to the position, but more importantly, the dispositions and the belief in building relationships.
So not just having the knowledge, but the drive and the aspirations.
Yes, the aspirations. And I think your best superintendents are those that only have the focus of the children in mind. How do I achieve success for each and every child? If that is the focus, then you don't have to worry about how the district will do.
The Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents is an advocacy group for superintendents, correct? What kind of work do you do there?
So 3.5 years ago when I took this job, it was really support for superintendents. It was professional learning. It was, some degree of representation on committees, legislature, governor's office. And it has changed tremendously during COVID. And the reason for that is I think I just saw a real need to be an advocate, yes, for school districts, but also a conduit with the State Department of Education and the governor's office, and certainly with the legislature. And it's amazing. I think, to be honest with you, I've been able to build an enormous group of relationships among all of them, which is very satisfying to me. I love
Hmm.
my job. The silver lining in the COVID is that I get to see well over 100 superintendents every week. I attend all their area meetings through Zoom. So that is also wonderful.
Speaking about COVID, obviously this has changed a lot for you and everybody. One of the issues that's got a lot of attention has been the school reopening plans. How do you think those are going so far?
So far, I think that the reopening plans that were put together last year and updated this year
Hmm.
are going very, very well. I'm thrilled this year, honestly, that
Hmm.
all of our students are back in full. I think that helps all of us. And the school system is a is not an entity unto itself. It sits within a municipality and
Yeah.
within a community. And it is incredibly important to that community to certainly have the best school system and the most successful students possible. And
Hmm.
so I do think the plans are going well in being able to bring all the students back and all the stakeholders, staff, et cetera, in a safe way.
What was kind of the thinking on reopening for the superintendents? Were there a lot of conversations between them and town governments, public health directors, a lot of coordination sort of stuff?
Oh, constantly. I mean, your local health department played a huge part in the reopening
Hmm.
plans and in working with them on mitigation strategies,
Hmm.
as did the mayor or first selectman, whoever it is, and their team. And in those communities where they worked very closely together, it was wonderful to see how they were able to, to economize, number one, buy
Hmm.
things together, et cetera, but also plan and work together on how they would approach the community on the reopening.
Yeah. I think, pool that knowledge is always a good way to go. You mentioned before how happy you were that kids are going back, and there's some people that are concerned right now with the rise of the Delta variant that it's not safe. Why is it important for our kids to be in school?
Well, we know, I mean, we've got test results to show it, but we knew before those test results ever came out that it was incredibly important to build the relationship between the teacher and the children that are in their classroom. And that
Hmm.
relationship, that social and emotional development and safety
Hmm.
in their feelings are the foundation for the teaching and learning that takes place. In
Hmm.
addition, the ability of the students to have other students with them,
Hmm.
they network and learn together and interact together. Teaching and learning is a very complex process that takes
Hmm.
place, and the relationships are so much a part of that,
Definitely.
and that's why it's wonderful to have them all back.
Yeah. And you said there's been some testing showing that kind of stuff. Is there any kind of difference between the elementary school kids and the high school kids? Like, is missing a year, your kindergarten year or your first grade year, kind of more of a problem than missing your sophomore, junior year or something?
Oh yeah, I mean, first of all, kindergarten children and first grade children on online is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Teaching them to read online, I think that is really very hard. I think many parents held their kindergarten children last year so
Mm.
that they could have an in-person experience this year. By the time you're in high school, many of those students have taken a course online or
Mhm.
are doing a lot of reading online, et cetera. I think that this experience of COVID was the most difficult in terms of teaching and learning for our youngest.
Yeah.
I think in terms of relationship and the networking with their peers, I think middle school and high school was pretty hard.
Yeah.
Many kids felt very isolated.
Yeah, I can imagine why.
Yes.
But you did mention that some of the high school kids had already done some online kind of learning stuff. Do you see there being room for some form of remote learning as part of a permanent thing going forward?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I think we need to really work hard on that. I think that we learned a lot during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to not leave that learning behind. For example, I might be in a school district that has a teacher that can teach German.
Mm-hmm.
You may be in a school district that has a teacher that can teach Mandarin.
Mm.
We should be able to join together, and those kids from both school districts should be able to attend class via Zoom in that other school district. I really think there are immense possibilities there.
Yeah.
When I was in Bridgeport, I had great difficulty attracting physics teachers. I mean, they're short supply anyway, but I really had a hard time getting them. And I would have loved to have been able to put my students online with Fairfield or Westport to learn physics.
Yeah, I imagine that when you get into that level, the kids that are interested in taking physics are the ones that are going to focus and are going to go to that class online and make sure they get to it because they're invested.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So another aspect of this discussion about, in the future with remote learning is, do we still need snow days? I know growing up, I love snow days, making snowballs, forts, the whole thing with my friends. But now, like, the idea is, if you could just be at home and be safe, but still be learning. So what do we do there?
Well, we were disappointed to learn that right now, in the very present time, we do not have the ability to offer remote learning on snow days. That was part of an executive order from the governor who gave the state board permission to offer that. We're hopeful that if, in fact, the state Senate today agrees and the governor is now, able to be in charge of executive orders going forward, that he will offer that again, because until we can get it into statute, I think every school district should have the ability to offer remote learning. Many of them did a combination. They said, okay, guys, we understand how nice it is to have a snow day. So the first 2 days will be snow days, but any days after that, we will do remote. Or they did every other one. And I think that's a great way to go, Matt, because, I have lived through, when I was superintendent in Hamden, we had a hurricane and a blizzard, and we had 13 days to make up. It was brutal.
Were you there for that 40-something inches of snow that one time?
Yes, and we went till the last day of June. I mean, it was.
I couldn't dig my car out for a week.
Yeah, exactly. It was horrific. So that's what I'm talking about. We just need to have that flexibility if it's necessary. Honestly, the kids are not going to learn at the end of June when it's so hot, and all they can think about is summer vacation.
Yeah. And I think, if last year we've seen, fires and floods in the south, like, luckily we've been pretty lucky in Connecticut, but, as some of these extreme weather events are becoming more common too, I think snow days could also be other sort of, natural disaster, as it were, days. So being ready is always a good idea.
Absolutely.
So COVID has brought some issues kind of front and center. And one of them was definitely the digital divide. It was a bigger issue last year, kids just starting to remote learning. But this year, we are focusing, along with you guys, on the HVAC issues with the heating and cooling systems in the schools. Can you tell us
Yes.
a little bit about some of your experiences with HVAC problems in schools?
Yes, actually, I'm thrilled that we are partnering with you and with other state organizations
Hmm.
on bringing forward to the governor and to the legislature just how important the HVAC systems are.
Hmm.
I did a survey, and there were just somewhere over 200 schools that are not air conditioned. The
At all.
majority of those, not at all. The majority were elementary schools,
Hmm.
but there were, also 9 through 12. And
Hmm.
I would say to you, when I was superintendent in Bridgeport, I'm several times in June and in September had to send children home half day because the conditions in the school were just so horrific
Yeah.
that you couldn't keep them in. I mean,
If you're sweating on your
people
homework,
say,
you're no good. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, people say, "Oh well, we didn't have that when we went to school, and we made it through." However, when I first started teaching, I taught in the old McKinley School on the east side of Bridgeport.
Hmm.
It was a fabulous place to begin my career, but the windows were huge, and
Mm.
you could open them up, huge,
Yeah.
and you could bring in all the air. The regulation windows today don't open like that, and
Yeah.
so the heat in those buildings was just something that we couldn't deal with. And I would also say that I spent an inordinate amount of time over in when I was in Hamden in the high school. They tried to upgrade, and it was just uneven. And I just feel that bonding should be put aside for that
Yeah.
because it's a huge amount of money which the ESSER dollars are not going to pay for.
Yeah. And you said that there's
It,
200 schools that have no air conditioning. Is that a function of them just being older buildings mostly?
I'm sure. I'm sure. I'm not. I can't tell you absolutely, but I think any of the new school buildings are more than likely air conditioned. But in the older days, I mean, even when the buildings were renovated, many times they did not put in the air conditioning.
You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH 103.5 FM.
Good morning, everyone, and to our friends in the media, thanks so much for joining us. I want to welcome you to this joint press conference. It's being put on by CCM, CEA, CABE, CAPSS, COST, AFT-CT, and CSEA of SEIU Local 2001.
So as we mentioned before, we've kind of started this coalition of us and some other teacher groups and
Yep.
other organizations. We had a press conference about it last week. What are some of your primary areas of concern regarding this?
Well, my first area of concern is, I'd like to have an audit of the, in-depth audit of the schools and what's needed. I'd like to have a long-term plan. I do believe breathing issues are issues. We have a large number of kids with asthma.
Mm-hmm.
We have large numbers with allergies,
Yeah.
and teachers as well. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't pretend to know everything about HVAC, but I do know that air conditioning is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And making sure that our HVAC systems are up to par is incredibly important. And to be honest with you, we need the state help on that, and it needs to be a long-term plan. And we need to chip away at it every year. I'm not saying we can do it all in 2022, but we can begin the process and issue, be able to issue bonding and have districts apply and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I just think it's incredibly important.
And when you mentioned asthma stuff, I think that's important for people to realize too, is that the health-related concerns about recirculating some of this air, there were problems before COVID with the air circulation, asthma, dust, mold, these sort of things, and especially in older buildings. In the press conference, a couple of people mentioned that kennels and pet stores have a standard of temperature, but classrooms don't.
Exactly.
So in the face of rising temperatures with climate change, what should be our standards?
I'm not 100% sure what the standards should be. I'd have to look to health officials, but I'd love to see a standard. I mean, when I walked into those buildings, if they were in the 80s, 85, 86, I'm telling you, they went that high. And, at one point in time, there was a classroom in a high school in Bridgeport that was 90. I mean, there is no way that teaching and learning can take place in that type of situation.
Yeah, I agree. So kind of based on your experience, you've been at this for a while, do you think we're going to see movement on this issue at the legislature? And if, what do you think it will take to fix this in all 169 towns?
I think we're going to need to keep it on the radar screen. I think the collaborative ability that we have to come together and hopefully propose a bill perhaps, or propose something that talks about bonding, and then we all testify. And it's really important for people to have a perspective on, so how much will this cost, and how can we fund it over time? I think that is an incredibly powerful way to go about things. And I think everyone needs to understand that school districts, whether they are cities or very small communities, cannot do this on their own.
So do you think we're still going to be talking about this a year from now?
I hope so. I'm hoping that in this session they agree, and that we are able to then, or the governor agrees, and I hope we're able to move forward with the bonding. I think bonding, in my opinion, bonding is probably the best way to go.
Both the remote learning and the HVAC, in some ways, are related to COVID. They've been brought to the front, certainly, by it. Are there issues for superintendents that might have gotten kind of pushed on the back burner a little bit or out of the limelight because of COVID that you would like to see brought back as we move forward?
Well, I think that there are several things that we need to think about. I do think the interconnectivity, I'm not saying that it was in the background. It was certainly in the foreground for COVID, but I think we have to keep up with it. I think we have to keep understanding how important it is. And I'm hopeful that at the federal level, they will do something about infrastructure and help us out with that, with connectivity. I believe every home needs to have that. I also think we have to keep in mind, while we bought well over 100,000, the state bought over, and philanthropic organizations bought well over 100,000 Chromebooks and computers. Yeah. We have to keep in mind that they have a lifespan. Do you know what I mean? So
I know when I was in school, I had books that were 10 years old. You can't have a laptop that's 10 years old.
No, you can't. You can't. Even though my iPad is, but that's okay. But I think we have to continue and keep it front and center and know that it's an ongoing cost. The other concern that I have is with the ESSER dollars. There is funding right now in our school district, and I think that what we have to realize is that has a shelf life as well, and 2024. And for many districts, especially the large urbans where over 100 million came in, we've got to be aware that there will be deficits in 2024, and we should be planning for them now.
Yeah.
I also think that as much as we can build capacity of, with long-term change, so that we're not at the phenomenal budget cliff in 2024 that's predicted is really important.
Definitely. So, we've talked about all these different issues and problems, but I guess the final question is, are you feeling optimistic about the future of schooling in Connecticut?
Honestly, Matt, I am so optimistic. We have a plan, a blueprint for transforming Connecticut's public schools. It is sort of like the HVAC plan. It's a 15-year plan. I've been talking about it with the legislature, et cetera. We've made some progress on it this year. And I think if we're all reasonable and we're all willing to work together and collaborate together, I honestly I see untold possibilities for Connecticut's kids. We have very good schools. We have wonderfully good municipalities. We have great things going on, and I think we can only get better as long as we're committed to working together.
Excellent. That report you mentioned, is that available on your website?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. All right, I'll post the website for everybody to look at right here.
I greatly appreciate that. Wonderful.
Excellent. So, Fran, thank you so much for speaking with us today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome, Matt. Anytime.
Excellent.
Anytime. I appreciate the collaboration at any time at all. We're all about the same things.
We're all in it together.
Thank you. Yep.
We'd like to thank our guest, Fran Rabinowitz. I'd like to thank our premier sponsors, Digital Back Office, Palo Alto Networks, who you can check out at digitalbackoffice.com and paloaltonetworks.com. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer, Christopher Kilson is our producer, Harry Draws on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like, and watch out for our CCM chat series on our YouTube page.